Welcome to the National Political Debates, brought to you by the Jamaica Debates Commission, in association with Jamaica Public Service Company Limited, changing lives with their energy, Canadian International Development Agency, CEDA, and Fodeno and Geddes Foundation, impacting lives, enriching communities. Tonight, we focus on leadership. Our moderator is Ian Boyne.
Good evening, and welcome to the final of 3 90-minute political debates organized by the Jamaica Debates Commission and staged before a live studio audience. The debates are intended to assist in identifying, clarifying, and understanding the issues being presented in this general election campaign. This evening's debate focuses on leadership issues. Our debaters tonight are Mr. Bruce Golding of the Jamaica Labour Party and Mrs. Portia Simpson Miller of the People's National Party. Members of the panel of questioners are Dion Jackson Miller, RJR News Center, Lloyd B. Smith of the Western Mirror, and Moya Thomas, also of the RJR News Center. I'm your moderator, Ian Boyne. The rules of the Debates Commission provides for the recognition of the debaters in their capacities of leading their parties. Hence, they'll be addressed as private citizens. The guidelines for tonight's debates have been previously agreed and are posted on the Debates Commission's website at www.jamaicadebatescommission.org. The guidelines include questions should not be longer than 30 seconds. Each debater is allowed 90 seconds to respond to each question. Rebuttals are limited to 45 seconds. The questions posed in tonight's debate are created solely by the panel and are not influenced by the Jamaica Debates Commission or the moderator in any way. Mr. Bruce Golding will make the opening statement, while Mrs. Portia Simpson Miller will make the final statement at the end of the debate. This was decided by a coin toss earlier. And now, the opening statement from Mr. Golding.
Thank you very much. The People's National Party has been in power for the last 18 and a half years. During that period, with the exception of the first 2 years, Jamaica has never achieved as much as 3% growth in any one year. Over that period, we have accumulated 460,000 persons who either can't find work or have given up trying to find work. During that period, we have accumulated a debt that is now costing the people of Jamaica $550 million every single day to service, more than we spend on health, education, security, and all the other government services combined. Over that period, we have seen the murder rate climb from 413 in 1988 to as much as 1,500. And during that period, we have seen our schools continue to graduate young men and young women barely able to read and write, rendered unemployable. Jamaica can't continue to operate like this. We can do better than this. There are many countries that don't have our resources that are doing better than this. And therefore, we have outlined a framework of policies that are designed to move Jamaica out of this slump, designed to create an environment that is friendly to investment. If we are to get growth, we need investment, but not any kind of investment. We need investment that creates jobs. We want investments that generate revenue so that we can tackle the critical problems that the country faces. That is what the Jamaica Labour Party offers the people of Jamaica in this election.
Thank you very much, Mr. Golding. Now we will hear Mrs. Simpson Miller's opening statement.
Good evening, my Jamaican family and members of the diaspora. Ladies and gentlemen, I have demonstrated in my first year and a half a leader that has the interest of the Jamaican people at heart. And that's why I implemented programs to assist that while balancing the books, I balanced people's lives. 600 million on rural electrification to impact the lives of 20,000 Jamaicans. Potable water impacting the lives of 162,000 Jamaicans. I would like to say to the Jamaican people, when I announced the free health care for children 18 and under, it became an issue. This is a leader that cares about her people. And if Mama is in charge, she must take care of the children. I just want to say to you, fellow Jamaicans, mothers, fathers, brothers, grandfathers, sisters, let me say to you tonight that it is time you will not just listen to the negative voices and the voice that will say to you, we have achieved nothing. We have achieved much, but there are plenty more things to do. And that's why I want to stay on course, on development, so that I can create wealth, work towards wealth creation, job creation, a better way of life, and to lift the Jamaican family so that things can be better for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson-Miller. Our first question tonight comes from Dion Jackson-Miller and will be directed to Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, one of your biggest credibility problems is that you've denounced garrisons in the past and you now represent Western Kingston. Given that many people simply do not believe you when you say Western Kingston is no longer a garrison, how much of a mistake was it for you and for your party for you to have taken the West Kingston route back to Parliament?
I think you're perhaps misquoting what I said. I have renounced garrison-type politics. And having committed myself to that more than 10 years ago, the position that I have to take is not to run from it. In 1997, when I contested the elections in central St. Catherine. What has to be done is that we have to transform a culture that has been entrenched in our politics for many, many years. Garrison is not a physical structure that you can tear down. It is a system and a culture that has to be transformed. That process actually started in West Kingston before I went there. We are continuing that. It is one of the most peaceful constituencies in the whole island. There's a relationship that exists between PNP and JLP supporters there that is second to none anywhere else in the island. And we have to continue that process. In our manifesto, we have actually set out some specific recommendations, proposals to deal with that problem of detribalizing our politics. One of the things, for example, is that we propose to enact into law the relevant sections of the Political Code of Conduct, and we propose to amend Section 40 of the Constitution to make violations that are against those particular provisions, to make them grounds on which a person can either be excluded from Parliament or prevented from entering Parliament.
Mr. Golding. Mr. Simpson-Miller, you will now have your 45 seconds of rebuttal.
I really believe that if we're discussing politics and garrison, Mr. Golding made some comments at some stage about association with certain kind of people. And the fact is that he never clarified whether he tried to direct them on a different path or he supported their actions and behavior. And I think that I await at some stage and at some time during this campaign to hear Mr. Golding defining clearly to the Jamaican people what he meant by the statement he made at some stage.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson-Miller. Dion Jackson-Miller has indicated that she would like to use the first of her two follow-up questions. Each journalist is allowed 2 follow-up questions for the duration of the debate, and Dion Jackson-Miller has indicated that she would like to use one of hers at this point. Mr. Jackson.
The question, Mr. Golding, was this is still a major credibility issue for you? How much of a mistake was it for you to choose that route?
I don't think it was a mistake at all. I think one has to face the challenges that one confronts in terms of that process of transformation. I think it's really interesting that Mrs. Simpson Miller speaks as she does. Fact of the matter is that she represents a constituency that has all the characteristics of garrison politics. Indeed, the kind of overvoting that has taken place in southwest of St. Andrew in the past is unmatched by any other constituency. We have to be truthful about this thing. We have to be honest. It has been a part of our political culture, and we must be prepared to confront that and join together in terms of the various measures that need to be put in place to bring it to an end. It is not something that must be perpetuated. It is not something that must be ignored or denied.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Simpson Miller, your 45-second rebuttal.
I'd just like to say, if you look on the results of the last election for Southwest St. Andrew, you would have seen a leader started making the change to ensure that people vote. Free and fair, one vote, same person.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Simpson Miller. Lloyd B. Smith of the Western Mirror, your question is next. And the question is to Mrs. Simpson Miller.
Mrs. Simpson Miller, if the PMP has failed to do enough during the past 80 years to sufficiently curb corruption, why should the Jamaican people trust you and your party now to do better in the fifth term?
Well, the People's National Party did put in place institutions to deal with the question of corruption. Why you can trust me? When I was Minister of Labour, I am the only Minister of Government that took action when a Minister of Government did something that was against the law, that broke the law, that ended up with that Minister of Government going to prison. And my party knows, and my ministers, anyone that is caught involved in anything breaking the law by way of corruption, I will take the strongest possible action.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Simpson Miller. Mr. Golding.
This government has been unwilling to take the strident approach in dealing with corruption that it ought to. One of the biggest areas of corruption has to do with the award of contracts. One of the biggest problems in terms of contract awards is that although the government has set out copious guidelines, they have no force of law, and therefore violations attract no sanction. For more than 2 years ago, I took a bill to Parliament seeking to bring those guidelines into the law as a schedule and then criminalizing breaches of those guidelines. It has sat on the order paper, fallen off, I have put it back. The government is not minded to enact that. The government does not have a firm commitment and is not prepared to give the will to deal with it.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Moya Thomas will now direct her question to Mr. Golding. Moya.
Mr. Golding, you have some persons around you who perhaps helped you in your ascendancy to the position you're in at the moment, who do not enjoy public respect or trust. Can we be given a guarantee that such persons will not be given positions in the cabinet, in junior ministry positions, or in any other positions of authority?
You would hardly expect me to respond to a question like that unless you identify who these individuals are. In terms of a JLP government, the judgment as to who will be members of that cabinet is my judgment to make. I'm going to make that judgment in the best interest of the people of Jamaica. But you can't really expect me to respond to that question when you have indicated who are these persons who don't command the respect of the people of Jamaica. We have fielded 60 candidates, and on the 27th of August, the voters of Jamaica will determine who are the candidates who command their respect. And it is from that body of candidates who are successful that I will choose a cabinet.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Mrs. Simpson Miller, your intervention at this point.
Based on Mr. Golding's response, it's difficult for me to give a rebuttal.
Moya Thomas has indicated that she wants to follow up with that question, and so I'll ask her at this point to follow up. her
Mr.
question.
Golding, it is my expectation that you have your ears to the ground and that you are well aware of the persons who might be loyal to you, who might be close to you, who the Jamaican public does not respect, does not trust.
Well, let me put it this way to you, Boya. We have put forward, and I don't think that one has been as strident as we have been on this. We have put forward a firm package of proposals to deal with corruption. We intend to appoint a special prosecutor with powers to investigate and to prosecute corruption in public life. We intend to enact provisions for impeachment of public officials who may be involved in corruption. And once we have done that, anyone, whether it is in my party, in my cabinet, anyone who is involved in corruption in any shape or form is going to be subject to the sanctions that will be imposed there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Golding. Mrs. Simpson-Miller.
I'd like to say that our 60 candidates, we have a blend of youth with energy, fresh ideas. We have the experience and wisdom of others. And for me, I will select the best possible team because we have 40% of our candidates are new, fresh faces with new, fresh ideas and thinking. And I will select from that pool, I will select the best possible cabinet ever.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson-Miller. We again hear from Dion Jackson-Miller, and she will direct her question to Mrs. Simpson-Miller.
Mr. Simpson-Miller, the government minister who has made the most mistakes in office is Mr. Paulwell. He made several of those mistakes before you became Prime Minister. You not only kept him in the cabinet, you gave him increased responsibilities. What reason is there for Philip Paulwell's continued prominence in governance other than your need to reward a political ally?
I did not reward a political ally. I think, if anything, the entire country can agree with me that this young man took a new ministry, a difficult ministry. He revolutionized the telecoms sector, worked very hard on looking at the diversification of our energy sector. In so much so, I know I got commendation from the President of the United States of America on our ethanol project.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson-Miller. Mr. Golding.
A minister who has been involved in so many mishaps, a minister who has been involved in the NetServe scandal, in the bad cement debacle, who quite recently was involved in the Universal Access Fund and the questionable transactions that took place there. That minister should long ago have been retired in the public interest.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Mr. Lloyd B. Smith. To Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, squatting remains a major social problem in the Jamaican landscape. In this context, what will be the future of Operation Pride under an administration led by you?
One would have to examine its structure and to see how it has functioned, and then to determine what sort of restructuring would be necessary. In terms of the broad approach to dealing with squatting, one of the things that we have to do is to cauterize it, and it can be done. Lands are not squatted overnight. It is a process, and because it is a process, if we are vigilant enough, we can put an end to it. But having put an end to it, you are going to have to make provision for those persons who need somewhere to live, are not able to access the traditional, the formal, structured arrangements. What we need to do is to develop service lots with basic infrastructure that can be made available to persons so that we say to them, don't go and squat on somebody's land. Come through this system, make the application, and build your house over time as you would normally do, and do it in a proper manner. While we do that too, we're going to have to address the problem of those areas that are already squatted. There has been for many years a settlement upgrading program. It wanes and it ebbs, and now it is not being pursued with the aggressiveness that it ought to. But it's going to have to be done because not only out of humanitarian concerns, the fact of the matter is that many of these squatter settlements, if they are not dealt with and upgraded and provided with proper sanitation, they pose a serious public health hazard. So we're going to have to do it on two fronts: to cauterize the squatting, to provide new facilities for persons, would-be squatters, and to address the problem of regularizing those settlements that have already been squatted.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Mrs. Simpson-Miller will now make her 45-second rebuttal.
The PNP is known for a government that is a government of distributing land to the poor of the land. And we've started a process of ensuring that we're legalizing a number of people who occupy government lands. As a matter of fact, in celebration of our emancipation, I announced 200 acres of land that will be distributed to landless persons. And this is part of a pilot project that was done before, and the Ministry of Agriculture is identifying other lands that will be given to people.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Simpson-Miller. It's a rainy night in Kingston and all over Jamaica. But in our studios, things are warm. We will take a short break at this time, and I know I don't have to urge you to stay tuned.
Powering economic development. Engaging minds. Equipping healthcare. Enhancing decision-making. Expanding creativity. Extending our days. Essential service. JPS, changing lives with our energy.
The Daniel Geddes Foundation is a charitable arm of Red Stripe. The foundation was formed exclusively for the purpose of carrying out charitable projects aimed at relieving poverty, suffering, and distress among Jamaican citizens. Our mission is about impacting lives and enriching communities. It is for this reason that we've partnered with many public and private sector organizations to enhance the quality of life of our fellow Jamaicans. Red Stripe and the Daniel Geddes Foundation have long contributed to nation building. The Daniel Geddes Foundation, impacting lives and enriching communities.
Go out and vote for who we want to vote for and respect each other.
Can't go every day a kill off one another, so we need love.
Violence just mash up Jamaica.
Even the devil vex over it, brother.
We are all one Jamaican.
We want peace and we want to know to reason one another.
Well, let's keep things violence free.
So please, peace all the way.
Crime free election, and that me I ask for.
Share a direct, unified love with each other.
One nation united under God.
Jamaica need love. No gun, just love.
I pledge on behalf of the entire EOJ to continue to conduct elections in an efficient manner, without fear or favor, and to always show respect to every voter.
Respect.
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 Respect. Respect.
Respect.
Respect.
1-888 call JPS. Quick response, toll-free link, easy way, at the touch of the tone, your questions answered. Right there on the phone. Customer service, the modern way, so don't delay. 1-888-225-5577. 1-888 call JPS.
The national political debates are presented by the Jamaica Debates Commission in association with Jamaica Public Service Company Limited, changing lives with their energy, Canadian International Development Agency, CEDA, and Daniel Geddes Foundation, impacting lives, enriching communities.
Welcome back to the final in a series of 3 political debates being facilitated by the Jamaica Debates Commission. If you're just joining us, welcome. Lloyd B. Smith indicated in the break that he would like to have a follow-up question directed to Mr. Golding.
Yes, Mr. Golding. There are many Jamaicans listening tonight who have been involved in the Operation Pride project. What I would like to hear from you, sir, is specifically, will the JLP abandon Operation Pride, or what will become of it in real terms?
Oh, we would not. What Operation Pride seeks to do, what its original mandate was actually to provide housing solutions for poor people. It lost that mandate. It got sidetracked and started building expensive houses. We would want to return it to the mandate, to that original mandate. What I meant, and you seem to have misunderstood me, is that in terms of the structure of Operation Pride, not the program, but the structure, its management, and how it operates, we would naturally have to review that. But that would be a critical instrument for dealing with the problem of squatting, for dealing with the problem of those persons who live on informal settlements and who need to be upgraded and titled.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Mr. Simpson Miller, your 45-second rebuttal.
Well, the People's National Party instituted the Operation Pride, and we did not move away from the mandate. And if anything, when I receive my mandate in my first term, I am going to be pursuing aggressively the Operation Pride scheme for housing, providing housing, program for providing housing for our people. And Mr. Golding should be reminded that he had the opportunity as Minister of Housing at one stage to provide housing for the poor of the land. I can assure the Jamaican people, I give my commitment that I am going to be building houses for the poor, middle income, and young professionals.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson Miller. We now invite Moya Thomas to direct her question to Mrs. Simpson Miller.
Mrs. Simpson Miller, Southwest St. Andrew, you have represented the people of that area for over 25 years, yet it remains a study in persistent poverty. Why have you been unable to really pull the people of Southwest St. Andrew out of the rut that they're in?
Well, Southwest St. Andrew is no different from all the other constituencies with inner cities. And the fact is that the allocation I receive from government, I put most of it to education, because I think education is the way by which we'll be able to break the cycle of poverty in the constituency. But I'd invite you to take a tour with me to Southwest St. Andrew and see the development taking place in the constituency now. I have been working in the area of housing, education, establishing a healthcare facility, and going through sporting programs, working with the young people, working with the community. I am working to transform the face of Southwest St. Andrew, that when I leave as Member of Parliament, when I retire as Member of Parliament, then Southwest St. Andrew, the person coming after me, will have very little to do. But I'm sure you will agree with me that I must have been doing something good. Why, for all these years, the people of Southwest St. Andrew continue to give me their wholehearted support. I love them and they love me. And I will continue to do what I have to do, because while I will continue to give support, balancing the books, I am working hard to balance people's lives, including my constituents.
Thank you again, Mrs. Simpson Miller. Your rebuttal, Mr. Golding.
Mrs. Simpson Miller is reported as having said recently that now that she had become Prime Minister, she would be able to allocate adequate resources to addressing the needs of her constituency. And I know, and I sympathize with her, because the constituency has been deprived of resources for many, many years. But that really can't be the answer. It can't be that a constituency can only be properly looked after if its Member of Parliament becomes Prime Minister. And that is why we are committed. We're going to set aside 2.5% of the budget. We're going to divide that equally among all 60 constituencies. It is going to amount to about $150 million a year. But the people have to be represented, and if central government is going to forget them, we have to make sure that resources are there to address their needs.
Thanks, Mr. Golding. Dion Jackson Miller will now direct another question to Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, I'm actually repeating a question from Franklin McKnight, which was not answered last night. Will the JLP commit not to introduce new taxes or to raise taxes after it takes office? And if you do so commit, what period of time would you make that pledge for?
We can't make any commitment about taxes. We're not in government. We don't know exactly what undertakings the government has entered into that have not yet been brought to book. If you're talking about how we're going to deal with the commitments we have made in the manifesto, let me say straight up that if under our administration the country is going to continue to grow at 2 and 2.5%, then we can't fund what is in our manifesto. And the government will not be able to fund what is in the PNP manifesto either. We have to grow the economy, and our commitments are predicated on that growth. But let's look at the immediate commitment. We are committed to removing tuition fees. That's $1 billion. We are committed to removing hospital charges. That's $2.5 billion. That represents less than 0.75% of the budget. It is a profound indictment of this government. If what they are saying is that they have so wrecked the finances of the country that a new government coming could not find 0.75% of the budget to effect its own policies. We're going to do it. I mean, there are many other areas where we're going to be able to effect savings, cutting out the cost overruns, cutting out the corruption. The North Coast Highway alone was $10 billion overrun. We're going to restructure Air Jamaica. We're going to seek a partner. We're going to try to get rid of those $10 billion of losses a year that we are experiencing now. There are resources that can be found if we have proper management.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Mr. Simpson-Miller, your rebuttal.
Well, I'm sure the Jamaican people are as confused now as they were last night. With the mountain of promises made by Mr. Golding, and he cannot at this stage say how he will fund, then something is wrong. And I think there's total confusion, and what will reign upon this country if Mr. Golding should be elected would be chaos. It would be not just not knowing where you're going, so any road will take you there. It would be total chaos. My government, I can assure you, we have been very prudent. We will continue to while we balance the people's lives.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson-Miller. Lloyd B. Smith to Mrs. Simpson-Miller.
Mrs. Simpson-Miller, leadership is much about keeping your head about you while others are losing theirs. Do you regret having said, "Don't draw my tongue"?
Well, the fact is, I'm happy you asked. But why is it? Historically, a man would never say, or culturally in Jamaica, "Don't draw my tongue." Mr. Golding said it the other day, it's not a problem. I said it, but it's a problem, and I think you should take into consideration the dishonest digital distortions with that ad. And I had apologized then to the people. I was speaking and rallying a political meeting. And for those who were offended, I apologized then. So I think that what we should look at is dishonesty and distortions in terms of some of the ad. I think if I should come up with some ad and add put to it some digital distortions, I am telling you, we would have heard some complaints, some quarrels. Nobody say anything. But I will not dignify that with a response. I don't mind it. It helps Portia. It does not hurt, because it demonstrates the respect for leaders of this country, and particularly respect for the women of the country.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson-Miller. Mr. Golding's rebuttal.
Well, you know, I'm in sympathy with Mrs. Simpson-Miller, because the political platform can be a dangerous place. And very often we say things that we later regret. But the fact of the matter is that she was responding to questions that were posed about a particular matter in government having to do with irregularities and at the New York Tourist Board office that needed to have been answered, have been answered fulsomely, so that the people of Jamaica could know how their resources were being taken care of. And in those circumstances, I thought that the response was most inappropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Moya Thomas now directs her question to Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, in spite of the People's National Party's shrinking majorities, the Jamaica Labour Party has successively failed to win elections or win general elections. Why do you think that over 18 years, after 18 years, somehow the Jamaica Labour Party still is unable to, in a definitive and overwhelming way, inspire the people of Jamaica?
Well, our string of losses is a thing of the past. The last time the two parties contested in 2003, we whipped the PNP, we won every council except Westmoreland and the municipality of Portmore. So that our losing ways are a thing of the past. We have turned that corner. We're going to win this election on the 27th of August in continuance of that approach. But the fact of the matter is that we have had problems within the party. We have internal problems we have had in the past, which I think have handicapped us in some respects. There have been challenges that we have had to face, and we're over that. We have a strong, united party. We're organized. We've been on the road, and we're going to win this time.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Mrs. Simpson Miller.
Well, the Jamaican people, I can say, trust the PNP. And now that I'm in the leadership of the government and the People's National Party, the Jamaican people will trust Portia. And so Mr. Golding will not win the elections because Portia will be winning the elections with the People's National Party, and we will also retake the parish councils across the country. And I'd also like to say that Mr. Golding said that what I said was not about what was said before. I'd just like to say to him, yes, but everybody, and we can use other people's words at political meetings as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson Miller. Dion Jackson Miller will now pose another question to Mrs. Simpson Miller.
Mrs. Simpson Miller, your government has so far failed to adequately explain how it is you're funding free health care for children. What are the major areas which have been cut back?
Well, we're funding the health care from the budget. And I'm sure the Minister of Finance addressed that before. We found money that we could use from the present budget to fund the free health care for children. And I ensure that I got that assurance before I made the announcement. I do not like to make promises. I give commitment, and I live up to my commitments. And so I checked, I was told yes, and I went ahead and gave the instructions.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson Miller. Mr. Golding.
Let's go back to this question of funding, because the wool is being pulled over the eyes of the Jamaican people. Let me state as a fact that over the last 2 years, because of the decline in interest rates, the government has saved $25 billion on interest payments on the domestic debt alone. $25 billion of savings over the last 2 years. What has the government done with it? What has Mrs. Simpson Miller's government done with it? They were able to finance the World Cup, $9 billion. They were able to provide $9 billion for Richard Azan to distribute as he likes, more than all of the money they had provided for road repair for the last 10 years.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Dion Jackson Miller has again indicated that she has a follow-up question for Mrs. Simpson Miller.
Mrs. Simpson Miller, as Prime Minister, with respect, that's not an adequate explanation. The people are entitled to expect the Prime Minister to be able to explain to them in detail how these programs are working, unless you're telling us that you had money hanging around that was being wasted.
No, we have no money hanging around. But as I told you before, that I'd made my check, I had discussions with the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Health. The Minister of Health found some of the money, and the Minister of Finance found some of the money that we used to fund the program.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson Miller. Lloyd B. Smith now directs. Mr. Golding, will give his rebuttal.
I don't know why we have such a difficulty in understanding. The government has discretion, you know. For the government to suggest that it does have any discretion, so it could not even accommodate the $350 million that was needed to deal with the limited amount of provision that was required for giving free health services to children. The fact of the matter is that I do have discretion. I indicated that the savings on the domestic debt alone gave them a lot of discretion. They used that discretion in areas that they consider to be priorities. It's just that our priorities are different. Our priorities would be to ensure that every child can go to school even if the parents can't find the money to pay the fees. Our priority would be to ensure that proper health care is given to all people in hospitals.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. And now Lloyd B. Smith directs this question to Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, trust is a very important part of leadership. How do you respond to those Jamaicans who oftentimes refer to you as Mr. Flip-Flop?
Well, let's see what flip-flop means. Let's raise the question of trust. Let's address that. Trust perhaps can involve questions of integrity and honesty. Nobody can challenge my integrity. I served as Minister of Construction for 8.5 years. There was no scandal in my ministry. There was no charge of corruption that was laid at my door. So what is trust all about? Trust may be about loyalty. But loyalty to what? Mrs. Simpson Miller, for example, says she was loyal to the PNP. She never left the PNP. I left the JLP. I left the JLP because I had a commitment to certain principles, and there was a fundamental disagreement between the party and myself over those principles. I stood up for those principles. Can you trust a man who stands up for principles? When we reach a reconciliation of those differences, I rejoined the Jamaica Labour Party. And I'm now leader of the party, and that has become part of the platform of the party. We talk about flip-flop. When Mr. Michael Manley committed himself to removing the cess on university fees when he became government, and didn't, when he said before he became government that he would never have anything to do with Mark Rich, and then signed an agreement with Mark Rich, what was that, flip or flop? When Mr. Pattison committed himself to phasing out cost sharing, and then reneged on that promise, what was that, flip or which flop? And when Mrs. Simpson Miller said it is the poor people who were going to fund her campaign, and then she accepted traffic guru money, flip or flop?
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Mrs. Simpson Miller
First
will now
of all,
give her rebuttal.
First of all, I did not accept traffic guru money, and the money was returned. The other thing is that leaders must be very strong, and when the going get rough, the leader must get tough. I disagreed with some principles from time to time with my party, but I stayed to influence the change and work my strategy. I did not move to another party. Leaders who cannot withstand toughness, then you tell me, how can you withstand challenges that will face anybody that is leading? As a leader, I felt I have a responsibility to remain, work my strategy, stay this course. Now I am Prime Minister and leader of the party.
Mrs. Simpson Miller. Mario Thomas has another question for Mrs. Simpson Miller.
Mrs. Simpson Miller, it is fair to assume that the shrinking majorities that the PNP has been getting is an indicator that at best the Jamaican people are growing tired of this government, and that something dramatic will need to happen in order for them to restore faith. What dramatic steps do you intend to take, especially in the issue of the perception of corruption, in order to restore the faith of the Jamaican people?
I had taken serious steps in terms of corruption before. I give the Jamaican people my commitment, I, Portia Simpson Miller, that any corruption in my government that is identified and found, I will have no hesitation dealing with it in the toughest possible way, and also to ensure that the law will have its course. And you talk about what the Jamaican people can, there's now hope. Portia is in charge, Mama is here, and I will do everything to ensure the one family, one Jamaica, as we shape the future together. I will be attacking and ensuring that I break the back of poverty, that I do everything. Mr. Golding spoke about the health care and ensuring. I wanted to ensure that no child would be feeling pain or not able to be taken to the hospital. In the same way, my priority attention on early childhood education. On the same way, we are pushing now aggressively with the transformation of the education process. I intend to push those, but I want to ensure that when I give a commitment, it can be undertaken. I'll have the money to support those programs. Jamaica can trust me when I tell you, trust me anytime, every time.
Mr. Golding.
The question was about corruption. This government is not serious about corruption. There has been scandal after scandal involving corruption. We paper it over. The level of cost overruns on government contracts is disgraceful. But we have a Corruption Prevention Commission that was set up to perform a critical role. They have a staff of 10. They have one member of staff who is supposed to enter into the computer over 17,000 submissions, integrity declaration. They've been crying out for resources, they can't get it. But the Financial Investigation Unit of the Ministry of Finance has a staff of over 100. We're not serious about corruption, we're serious about trying to collect taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Sharp questioning from our team of senior journalists and disciplined use of time from our two debaters. We will now take a short break while you continue your debate, no doubt. We'll be back with you shortly.
Powering economic development. Engaging minds. Equipping healthcare. Enhancing decision making. Expanding creativity. Extending our days. Essential service. JPS, changing lives with our energy.
The Daniel Geddes Foundation is a charitable arm of Red Stripe. The foundation was formed exclusively for the purpose of carrying out charitable projects aimed at relieving poverty, suffering, and distress among Jamaican citizens. Our mission is about impacting lives and enriching communities. It is for this reason that we've partnered with many public and private sector organizations to enhance the quality of life of our fellow Jamaicans. Red Stripe and the Daniel Geddes Foundation have long contributed to nation building. The Daniel Geddes Foundation, impacting lives and enriching communities.
Hello, I'm Rihanna Wright, an indoor agent for the Jamaica Labour Party.
And I am Nadran Palmer, indoor agent for the People's National Party. And I just love this new wave of unity.
Yes, we are learning to follow the rules and respect each other.
It's foolish to fight over elections.
We know we can trust the electoral system.
Your vote is your right and responsibility. No one should take that from you.
Violent actions will only destroy your family, your community, and our country. I pledge on behalf of the entire EOJ to continue to conduct elections in an efficient manner without fear or favor, and to always show respect to every voter.
Respect. Respect.
Respect.
Respect.
1-888 call JPS. Quick response, toll-free link, the easy way, at the touch of the tone. Your questions answered right there on the phone. Customer service, the modern way, so don't delay. 1-888-225-5577.
national political debates are presented by the Jamaica Debates Commission in association with Jamaica Public Service Company Limited, changing lives with their energy, Canadian International Development Agency, CEDA, and Dano and Geddes Foundation, impacting lives, enriching communities.
Welcome back to the final in a series of 3 political debates being facilitated by the Jamaica Debates Commission. If you are just joining us, welcome. From Athens to Kingston, the long and honored tradition of democratic debate and discussion continues. And in the spirit of Socrates, Moya Thomas wants to ask a follow-up question to Mrs. Simpson-Miller.
Mrs. Simpson-Miller, I don't feel certain that I got an answer to the question of what dramatic steps you will take. The problem with corruption is that many times you can't find someone to charge necessarily, and so there is just an unsavory feel to things. And I'm trying to find out from you what definitive and structured steps you're going to take to ensure that there is a change in the perception of the PNP government.
Thank you. Let me remind you that it was the People's National Party government that established a number of institutions to deal with corruption, including the Corruption Commission that Mr. Golding mentioned. And when Mr. Golding spoke, I think he should look back at the Ashton Wright book and the report about his personal interference in terms of corruption. I'd like to say to you, I will be very firm, and that's why I'm establishing an office at the Office of the Prime Minister. I'm putting in a special division that will be dealing with monitoring and also looking at a number of areas so that anything that could be deemed corrupt, we will deal with.
Simpson-Miller. Mr. Bruce Golding will now make his rebuttal.
I wonder what the Prime Minister is talking about. I wonder if Mrs. Simpson-Miller had bothered to check the facts. She's talking about the coffee board factory and the contract. The contract came to the Contracts Committee. The architect advised that the second lowest tenderer, not the lowest, the second lowest tenderer was to be awarded the contract. The Contracts Committee said, no, we're giving it to the lowest tenderer. How did it turn out? The architect was the chairman of the board of the company that was the second lowest contractor, so the second lowest bidder. What a conflict of interest. And the Contract Committee quite rightly said no, and Cabinet upheld their decision. That's probity. That's transparency.
Thank you very much. DeAndre Axel-Miller now will direct a question to Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, the JLP seems to expect to fund a lot of its proposals from increased tax revenues, which you say would come from more investment. There's no clear indication, though, of how long you think this would likely take to materialize. Isn't it true that we probably would be looking at a medium-term outlook for any such increased revenues, which might be 5 years or more?
It wouldn't take as long as 5 years. Investment is a market activity. We have to go into the market. We have to attract the kind of investment that can create jobs, that can enhance our revenue. The government has attracted some investments that don't create jobs. The investment that was supposed to come for the expansion of Jamalco, for example, almost $1 billion of investment. How many new jobs would that create after the construction? 120. We're not sneezing at any kind of investment. What we're saying is that we have a particular problem. There are countries in Europe that have a shortage of labor, and therefore they are into the kind of investments that don't involve creation of new jobs. That's what they call jobless growth. That kind of growth doesn't suit Jamaica. We have a surplus of labor. We have to find work for our people. And therefore we have to go into the market, we have to attract, we have to make sure that we create the kind of environment that will be attractive to those investments that come here and create jobs. Once you create jobs, you enhance your revenues. Why? Because 2/3 of the revenues are derived from either wage-related taxes or consumption-related taxes. Once you create jobs and people are spending money, people are consuming, your revenues will go up. That's something that we're going to have to fast track. It's going to be a process. What we are not going to do is to sit and be content with 1.5% and 2% and 2.5% growth that the government seems to pride itself with. That has gone on for too long, and I tell back the country.
Thank you again, Mr. Golding. Mr. Simpson-Miller will make her 45-second rebuttal.
If you check our manifesto, you will see growth is a serious part of our platform. The fact is that suppose Mr. Golding, if he should, and I know he will not, how will he, if he does not attract the level investment he's talking about? And I want to remind Mr. Golding, look on the investments that we have attracted in the tourism sector, in the construction sector, the thousands of jobs created as a result of those investments. We're not to behave as if nothing happened and we attracted no investments. Of course, maybe if you had said it could be more, I would agree with you. But do not say that, because we have attracted much.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson-Miller. Lloyd B. Smith now directs yet another question to Mrs. Simpson-Miller.
Mrs. Simpson-Miller, it has been said that successive Jamaican governments only respond to roadblocks when the people are aggrieved. Does your party have any plan of action to set in place the necessary mechanism so that the people of this country, the poor, ordinary people of this country, can get a better level of responsiveness from government?
Thank you very much. When I responded to Moya, I indicated that I was establishing in my office a section that would be monitoring and doing a number of things, getting on the ground, seeing what is happening. And we would be establishing lines so that people who are dissatisfied can call into the office of the Prime Minister. Follow-up can be done. And when a directive goes to a minister from the Prime Minister, I'm sure they will have to deal with it. Mr. Golding spoke earlier about Richard Azan and 9 billion. It was said yesterday 6, it's now 9. And I just like to say that the capital budget for that ministry is for roads was $4.5 billion. Neither 6 nor 9. Perhaps I could also deal with the question of the stadiums. Both stadiums cost $4 billion. A part of the money that Mr. Golding referred to dealt with roads, hospitals, equipment, police, equipment for the police, and a number of other things that would have to be in place to allow us to properly host Cricket World Cup.
Thanks, Mrs. Simpson-Miller. Mr. Golding gives his rebuttal.
Mrs. Simpson-Miller hasn't really responded to the question. The truth of the matter is that notwithstanding the scarcity of resources, like on animal farms, some people are more equal than others. There are many constituencies and communities within those constituencies that suffer, some of them because of neglect, some of them because of downright victimization. If you're a backbencher in Parliament, you're not likely to be treated very handsomely. If you happen to be a backbencher on the opposition benches, dog, nyam your supper. And when we propose to set aside a certain amount of the budget to be divided equally among all constituencies, it's to ensure that some of the things that cause roadblocks can be addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Moya Thomas has a question for Bruce Golding.
Mr. Golding, if Jamaica asks you to form the next government, it's unlikely that everything, well, certainly the Jamaican people will not want you to throw everything out. And they certainly won't want to start everything from scratch. In your assessment of what needs to be done for Jamaica, which of the currently functioning policies and programs of the government do you see as fit to keep and build on?
Oh, there are a number of them, and there are many of them. And it would take a long time for me to sort of name them out. There are some of them that have been developed out of collaboration between ourselves and the government. I want to point out to you that one of the things that I've long felt is an area where we have missed many opportunities is the fact that planning long-term goals that we need to galvanize the people of Jamaica have been hard to agree on. There's a process now initiated by the government through consultations with me, through the Planning Institute of Jamaica, that is seeking to create these broad national goals that both government and opposition can agree on. But more importantly, if you look in our manifesto, you will see a framework that is laid there in terms of good governance that involves collaboration between the government and opposition. When we propose, for example, for the opposition to chair every sessional committee of Parliament, to give it the same sort of strength as exists with the Public Accounts Committee, it is to create a basis on which there can be this kind of collaboration and working together. If we can't do it that way, then we're not going to go ahead. And for that reason, there are a number of policies that we are going to adopt. There are a number of new policies that we're going to introduce. There are some policies of government that we feel are inappropriate, and we're going to have to either change them drastically or dispense with them altogether.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. The rebuttal.
I'm very happy that Mr. Golding recognized, and it is in his it manifested itself in his manifesto, the number of things and the number of times he said continue rather than will. You check my manifesto and you see all the things that we will stay on course with, but the things that I am bringing my own stamp to government on. And I'm very happy that he said that. In terms of getting back to what he said about the roads and roads blocks, I did not respond to maybe saying some of the things I'm doing, because roads, water, electricity, these are some of the challenges that cause the roadblocks, and we are dealing with it.
Miller. Dion Jackson Miller has another question for Mrs. Simpson Miller.
Mrs. Simpson Miller, your cabinet colleagues who have been working closely with you for years told the country last year that you weren't capable of running the country. Aren't your colleagues in the best position to judge your intellectual capacity and job skills, and shouldn't the country then accept their own assessment of you?
I agree with you, but I think if you ask my colleagues now, they will tell you that they could never have found a better leader. Ask any of them, and I'm sure that is what they would say to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson Miller. Mr. Golding.
It's an issue that I would not wish to comment on. Other than to say that on the 27th of August, the people of Jamaica will make their own evaluation, their own assessment, and they will record their own judgment.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Lloyd B. Smith now addresses another question to Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, crime and violence, especially in the inner city areas of Jamaica, the people there are still crying out. And even now, as we are here, sir, one does not get a sense that there is a very definitive plan to deal with this particular issue. Could you respond to that, please?
Lloyd B, it has to be tackled on several fronts, but those fronts fall in two broad areas. You have to strengthen law enforcement. The government announced that it was going to increase the establishment of the police force for a long time ago. It hasn't been done yet. It needs to be done as a matter of urgency. We have to ensure that the police are more effective. We have to provide them with the equipment, the tools, the training. One of the proposals that we have made is to see to what extent we can civilianize more of the functions that are being carried out by policemen now, because there are some functions that we feel can be done by civilians. You have to strengthen them, and you have to enable them to go out there and to deal effectively. You have to deal with the question of intelligence. That's a very weak area. The gathering, the management, the analysis, the utilization of intelligence. I think if you did that, you could significantly reduce the crime rate, but you're going to get to a point where it's not going to be possible to bring it down much further until you pursue serious social intervention measures to bring new hope in these communities. When the society pulls the curtain around these inner cities and virtually say, well, we're not too concerned about you, what you're saying to them is, you don't need to really respect law and order because those laws are really not for you. This is a different kind of society we're dealing with. We're going to have to bring hope there. We're going to have to renew those people's spirit through social intervention measures.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. The rebuttal goes to Mrs. Simpson Miller.
We have a definitive plan, and as a matter of fact, the JLP's manifesto captured a number of what was tabled in Parliament by Minister Phillips by way of our policy document. The increase in terms of the manpower was passed by Cabinet, and so in my new term that will be implemented quickly. In terms of civilians' involvement with crime fighting, we should regard civilians in communities as crime fighters as well. But we have to be careful to the extent, unless we consider it carefully, how we pass on those activities.
Mrs. Simpson Miller. Lloyd B. Smith is indicating that he wants to use his final follow-up question, and you would want to direct that follow-up question
to Mr. Golding.
To Mr. Golding.
A follow-up to the question I'd asked earlier. I wanted to bring into this the whole question of capital punishment, which many Jamaicans see as a possible deterrent. How do you plan to resolve the issue surrounding capital punishment, given the disparity of views even in your own party?
Well, we take the position that so long as it's part of the laws of Jamaica, it must be enforced. We don't believe that we have any right to decide which laws we are going to uphold and which ones we are not. We are sworn by our oath to uphold all the laws of the country. The problem is that when condemned prisoners, convicts, have exhausted their local appeal and all the various judicial processes, the government is not issuing any death warrant. And therefore the condemned man, he sits there, he doesn't trigger his appeal to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, because he waits until he gets the death warrant to start the process, by which time the 5 years set by the Privy Council would have elapsed. I'd love Mrs. Simpson Miller to tell you when last has a death warrant been issued by this government.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Mrs. Simpson Miller.
Well, we're all aware why, and we also know that when the people go through their appeal process, you cannot take action on a convicted person in terms of death when there's an appeal. And the fact is, what we should move to swiftly is to ensure that we move away from the Privy Council and move to the Caribbean Court of Justice, where the people there would understand the culture and the history of our people and would move swiftly to assist us in terms of justice.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson Miller. It's now time for us to take our final break. We ask you to stay with us. We will be as gripping as we have been in the earlier sections.
Powering economic development. Engaging minds. Equipping healthcare. Enhancing decision making. Expanding creativity. Extending our days. Essential service. JPS, changing lives with our energy.
The Deno and Geddes Foundation is a charitable arm of Red Stripe. The foundation was formed exclusively for the purpose of carrying out charitable projects aimed at relieving poverty, suffering, and distress among Jamaican citizens. Our mission is about impacting lives and enriching communities. It is for this reason that we've partnered with many public and private sector organizations to enhance the quality of life of our fellow Jamaicans. Red Stripe and the Deno and Geddes Foundation have long contributed to nation building. The Deno and Geddes Foundation, impacting lives and enriching communities.
Go out and vote for who we want to vote for and respect each other.
Can't go every day and kill off one another, so we need love.
Violence just mash up Jamaica.
Even the devil vex over it, brother.
We are all one Jamaican.
We want peace and we want to know to reason one another.
Well, let's keep the thing violence free.
So please, peace all the way.
Crime free election, and that me I ask for.
Share a direct, unified love with each other.
One nation united under God.
Jamaica need love. No gun, just love.
I pledge on behalf of the entire EOJ to continue to conduct elections in an efficient manner without fear or favor, and to always show respect to every voter.
Respect.
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 Respect. Respect.
Respect.
1-888 call JPS. Quick response, toll-free link, the easy way, at the touch of a tone. Your questions answered right there on the phone. Customer service, no modern way, so don't delay. 1-888-225-5577. 1-888 call JPS.
The national political debates are presented by the Jamaica Debates Commission in association with Jamaica Public Service Company Limited, changing lives with their energy, Canadian International Development Agency, CEDA, and Dano and Geddes Foundation, impacting lives, enriching communities.
Welcome back to the third and final in a series of 3 political debates being facilitated by the Jamaica Debates Commission. If you're just joining us, you're late, but welcome. We'll now invite Moya Thomas to pose her question to Mrs. Simpson Miller.
Mrs. Simpson Miller, is there anything which the Jamaica Labour Party has articulated as its original thought or its original idea or ideal which you have bought into and believe that you should take on and implement in the coming season in the event that you are asked to form the government again?
I am now going through the manifesto of the JLP. Anything I find in that manifesto that would be good for the people of Jamaica, I will have no hesitation discussing with Mr. Golding and implementing same, as long as it is in the interest of the majority of the Jamaican people.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson Miller. Mr. Golding?
There is no doubt that there are areas of convergence. Thankfully, we no longer have the bitter ideological division that existed between the JLP and the PNP back in the 1970s. I think the PNP has come to its senses on that. And therefore, there are going to be areas where we're going to converge. One important area where we reached agreement had to do with how do we deal with education. There was that historic agreement struck in Parliament during the time that Mr. Seaga and Mr. Pattison were at the helm. And we were very disappointed that that agreement was just totally disregarded. The commitments that were given there were not honored. We need to do better than that. We need to find those areas where we can find common ground and work together.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Dion Jackson Miller now to Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, what's your timetable that you're looking at for the implementation of these programs that the JLP is proposing, specifically removal of tuition fees, health fees, and the Constituency Development Fund?
The removal of tuition fees will take effect at the opening of the school term in September. The removal of hospital fees and the establishment of the Constituency Development Fund will take effect at the commencement of the next fiscal year in April of next year.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Mrs. Simpson Miller's rebuttal will be taken at this point.
I do not know how Mr. Golding can say what will be and when he does not know what is there presently in the budget. And so I'm just saying that, again, the promises, but I do not think I should comment on what, because I know it will not happen. Because on the 27th, I will be given my mandate, and so I'll be able to continue the progress and to ensure that not only promising a free education, but ensuring that children can access quality education and their circumstance of birth will not be able to determine.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson Miller. Lloyd B. Smith now poses his question to Mrs. Simpson Miller.
Mrs. Simpson Miller, I want to turn a little bit to foreign policy. Which should be more important to Jamaica at this time, being a close ally of the United States or an even closer ally of Hugo Chavez in Venezuela?
I would prefer if the statement had said an ally to Venezuela, because Jamaica has an historic relationship with Venezuela, irrespective of who the president might be. And I think it is important in terms of our foreign policy. We are friends of all, enemies to none. We keep principled positions. There are times when we have to vote. We vote with those we consider our friends, and there are times when we vote against them because we vote with principle.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson Miller. Your take on this, Mr. Golding?
We had warned the government about to be very careful about the intentions of Mr. Chavez. Mr. Chavez has a clear agenda. It's an agenda that is hostile to the United States. I don't think that we needed to get into that. And it's quite obvious that Mr. Chavez is determined to manipulate his relationships within the hemisphere. I think that we should look to the approach that is being taken by President Lula of Brazil, who is seeking to redefine the trading arrangements, not just within the hemisphere, but of the world. But he hasn't taken that hostile, bombastic approach that Chavez has taken. I think we better follow Lula of Brazil and let Chavez know that we'll remain friends of his, but he's not going to be able to manipulate us.
Mr. Simpson's Miller's time was unfortunately cut short, so we'll ask her to continue her thoughts on that. Mr. Simpson Miller.
The fact is that no government anywhere in the world can manipulate my government. We are very strong on foreign affairs. No one can manipulate us. No one can buy us. We are principled in terms of, and President Lula himself that I invited when I visited Brazil indicated that our standing in the international community in terms of foreign affairs, we are leaders. And we will continue to be leaders. And I know for the short time I'm Prime Minister, I've made my mark on the international scene.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson Miller. Now, Moya Thomas will pose a question to Mr. Bruce Golding.
Mr. Golding, Jamaica has failed in its efforts to divest successfully Air Jamaica and the sugar assets. What specifically are you going to do, and could you explain how in a structured way you are going to bring profit or do what is necessary, take the tough decisions in order to make it work?
Well, let's go back to how Air Jamaica started. Air Jamaica started as a partnership between Jamaica and Air Canada. We eventually took full control of it. The rest, you one may say, is history. Apart from, I think, its first year or second year, I remember Eric Bell was the minister at the time, Air Jamaica has never made a profit. We want to look at the Sri Lankan experience. Sri Lanka had an airline that was about the same size as Jamaica, 12 planes. They were incurring losses just as Air Jamaica had been incurring. They entered into a joint venture arrangement with the Emirates, where the Emirates acquired, I think, 40% of the airline. Sri Lanka retained 60%. So that the airline continues to fly as the national airline of Sri Lanka, employing Sri Lankan crews, but is no longer losing money. In fact, after 4 years, they started making money. We want to explore the possibility of entering into that kind of arrangement because while Air Jamaica is important and we are determined to keep it flying, the poor people of Jamaica cannot be asked to continue to bear the burden of $10 billion of losses every year. We have to find a solution that gives us the best of both worlds. A national airline that is efficiently run, that is brought into a wide global network that we now do not control, but at the same time without having the burden to carry.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Mrs. Simpson Miller will give her rebuttal.
I think that for us, when we have to discuss Air Jamaica at Cabinet, it is very painful because when you think of the woman that is not able to send her child to school or to provide for her children, it is a problem. But the fact is, we are all aware that it is important to keep Air Jamaica flying, because airlift is very important to tourism. And apart from that, our Jamaicans in the diaspora are closely attached to Air Jamaica. It is something that we have to look at. We have just entered into a new arrangement. We'll be watching closely to see how it is working, and then we will take other decisions.
Simpson-Miller. At this point in the debate, the party representatives will ask a single question of each other. The questions must not be longer than 30 seconds, and the responses must not be longer than 1.5 minutes. Mr. Golding, you have the first question.
I want to ask Mrs. Simpson-Miller, I want to go back to where we began. In 18 years, this economy has not grown by any significant amount. In 18 years, we have had a crime rate that has gone out of control. In 18 years, we have had an education system that is not educating our children. You've been there for these 18 years. Now, what reason would the people of Jamaica have to expect? Since you say you are not changing course, what reason would they have to expect?
Thank you.
Anything better,
Mr.
if you're
Golding.
returned?
Mrs. Simpson-Miller?
Because the people of Jamaica know that they can trust me. And if you look at my manifesto, it's a serious manifesto where I'm going for growth, I'm going for investment, I'm going for development, I'm going for the things that will bring about the growth in the economy. And you notice we have said we want to move to 7%. I am serious about it. I am a very hard worker. Everyone that is working alongside me understand this, and this will happen. And I can assure you that it will happen. But you were there in the JLP, and there are a number of things that you did not achieve as well, in terms of providing housing for poor mothers, like completing the house in Majestic Gardens, the houses that were started by a PNP administration, and you did not complete. A number of other things, like you announced and closed down the assistant teaching program for the primary school students at Jose Marti, who are receiving free boarding, free everything, free tuition, free everything, and you announced it and closed it. So there are a number of things that both of us might have done or will do that might not find favor with others. But I can assure you, I am on course for the growth and development of this country, where we'll have prosperity that everyone will enjoy and share.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson-Miller. It is now your turn, Mrs. Simpson-Miller, to ask your question of Mr. Bruce Golding.
Bruce, my friend, you were against the opening up of the parliamentary committees to the press. You fought the establishment of the values and attitude programs, and turned it into a divisive issue, although it was supposed to be able to bring back that old-time family values. You prevented the Charter of Rights from being passed when you called to the game as leader of the NDM.
Mr. Golding?
I don't know what Mrs. Simpson-Miller is talking about. Insofar as the Public Accounts Committee is concerned, I sought the advice of civil servants who said to me that we are going to be less willing to be factual and frank at those discussions if it is open to the press. Events have proven that that is not in fact so, that it was a good idea. And I'm prepared to say, now in hindsight, it was good that it is opened up, and much more is being opened up. You speak about Jose Marti. Then if it was such a bad thing, Portia, how is it that 18 years have passed and you haven't restored it to what it was? If it was such a terrible thing to do. No, I think you have your facts all mixed up, and your arguments are weak.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. We will now go to closing statements. Mr. Golding, please go first.
Thank you very much. I have an abiding faith in the people of Jamaica. I have a passion about our capacity as a people to do great things, to achieve greatness. And that is why I'm so embarrassed when I see countries send kits, Grenada, countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, countries that have been through trauma that we have never had to encounter. When I see these countries are growing 2, 3 times as fast as Jamaica, I feel ashamed. And therefore I ask myself the question, what is it that they have that we don't have? Or perhaps the better question to ask is, who is it that we have that they don't have? I believe that Jamaica can do much better than it has been doing. And I'm committed, my team, the Jamaica Labour Party is committed to putting in place the kind of management, the kind of policies, the kind of forward thinking that will move this country forward to make up that lost ground. I have said repeatedly, and I'm going to keep saying, that Jamaica is just too rich to be so poor. We're too blessed to be so stressed. We can do much better than we are doing. But we're not going to do any better if we refuse to change course. We're going to change that course. We're going to lead the process of changing that course. I want to see a country, and I am confident that the Jamaican people under our leadership can achieve it, where everyone may not be rich, but no one has to be poor. I want to see a country that offers people a better way for a better life, where the young can wake up in the mornings with a smile on their face because they know that they're going to do better today than they did yesterday. And they can have the confidence that tomorrow they'll be able to do even better than they're able to do today. We are a tremendous people. We have been held back by a management and a set of policies that have paralyzed this country. We want to loose those chains and to take this country forward.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. Mrs. Simpson-Miller, could you please go ahead with the closing statement of tonight's debate?
This new Jamaica has no time to waste on wild experiments. The cost of the promises of the Jamaica Labour Party, they will never ever be able to fund. And so, for me, I am going to be going full speed ahead with the programs outlined in the manifesto of the People's National Party to provide hope. And I want to say to my Jamaican mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, there's no time to listen to the negative voice. We are a people, a great people. We are achievers. We are not losers. Your sons and daughters are making a very valuable contribution. They are excelling on the international stage. They are excelling locally. Trust me. Look at young Irving. Went across the globe on the wings of inspiration. Your children can do it too. Asafa Powell, your children can do it too. I come from humble beginnings. I am now Prime Minister. Your children can reach anywhere. Do not listen to the negatives, or you will continue to think negatively. It will sap your energy. What I want to do is to harness the potential and the energies of the Jamaican people in culture, the arts, the musicians, the artists, everyone, and unleash it on the society as we work for a better Jamaica. One Jamaica, one family, shaping the future together. I am going to ensure I make life better for the majority of the people who are poor. I'm going to strike a serious blow against poverty. Watch me work when you give me my mandate. My work will be for you and you will be at the center.
Thank you, Mrs. Simpson-Miller. The democratic tradition lives on. And in the spirit of that tradition, our debaters will now shake hands. The ubiquitous hug and kiss. Thank you very much. This concludes the final debate, this highly anticipated debate between Mr. Bruce Golding and Mrs. Portia Simpson-Miller. Thank you, Mr. Bruce Golding, candidate for the Jamaica Labour Party. Thank you, Mrs. Portia Simpson-Miller, candidate for the People's National Party. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the series of political debates facilitated by the Jamaica Debates Commission. I wish to thank especially the participating debaters from the JLP and the PNP. Our appreciation to our 3 panel of questioners and to our other moderators. These debates would not have been possible without the tremendous support we received in warm and respectful atmosphere from the political representatives. The debates were financed through the kind support of the Jamaica Public Service Company, the Denwin Geddes Foundation, the Canadian International Development Agency, and the United States Agency for International Development. On behalf of the Jamaica Debates Commission, thanks to you, our viewers and listeners in Jamaica and 18 other Caribbean countries and the United States, as well as in other countries via the World Wide Web. Thank you all. I am Ian Boyne.